Welcome to the first video I'm making that doesn't directly focus on roller coasters. I know. Consider this as me doing you guys a service. I wanted to go over what equipment Katie and I use to get the high quality footage that we do. First, I'd like to start talking about the main workhorse of ours. This would be the Sony a7R IV. This awesome piece of equipment can shoot photos at 61 megapixels and shoots 4K footage up to 30 frames per second. It isn't the best as far as video features go, but it is still incredibly capable. Generally speaking, I like to use the 200 to 600mm lens from Sony while taking photos. This lens is awesome and allows me to reach out far to get some truly unique shots. It is also surprisingly sharp. The only major downside with this lens is the variable aperture. It is listed as f5.6 to 6.3. This means that the iris isn't particularly fast and will lose some flexibility the further you zoom in. On the contrary, most of our photography is done during bright, sunny days, so it isn't an issue for me trying to get enough light on the subject. Moving on, we have my other favorite lens to use, which is the Sony FE-G 12 to 24mm lens. This lens has a minimum f-stop of f4.0 and provides for an insanely wide perspective, especially when paired with the full frame of the a7R IV. This lens plays a completely opposite role to the previous lens in that it captures everything all at once. I always get surprised by how wide the field of view is on it. I mainly only use this lens in situations where I want to capture things like park photos and the likes. It does a really good job at this, allowing for me to easily create a walkthrough of an entire park just by snapping some quick photos. Some honorable mentions would be the other two lenses Katie and I use. While I cover the extremes, she covers everything in between with both of her lenses. The first of these is the Sony FE 24 to 105mm lens and the FE-GM 70 to 200mm lens. The 24 to 105 lens is great at being an all-rounder lens that can capture wide enough and narrow enough to get a huge range of shots. The 70 to 200 is her favorite lens, and for good reason. This lens does a great job at zooming in just far enough to get some awesome shots and is insanely sharp. In fact, I'm pretty sure it's sharper than my lens. This lens is incredibly fast and can stop down to as low as f2.8, allowing for extremely tight depth of field. We mainly use these cameras for taking photos, but on the rare occasion where we can get things stable enough, we'll use them to capture video as well. Now, I know I'm using a lot of technical talk right here, and I don't want to try to convince you that Sony cameras are the best for this type of situation, but, well, they are. The next piece of equipment is even more valuable to me, but it is a fraction of the cost of the Sony camera. Introducing the DJI Osmo Pocket. This amazing piece of technology has been a mainstay in my video armory since 2019, and it hasn't failed me since. I personally have the first version of the Osmo Pocket, and Katie has the version 2. I personally have mine stored in a charging case, which does a good job at keeping it topped off on battery for an entire day. The other benefit of this charging case is that it can hold 3 ND filters and 2 spare micro SD cards. The Osmo Pocket is capable of recording 4K footage up to 60 frames per second, however, I prefer to record at 24 frames. The other nice thing about the Osmo Pocket 1 is that it has an equivalent to a 26mm focal range, which is just narrow enough to allow me to get cinematic looking footage while being wide enough that I can capture just about anything. The Osmo Pocket 2 has a wider field of view at an equivalent of 20mm, which is a tad bit too wide in my opinion. There are a few differences in the way the two cameras capture color, but I won't go too far into this. If you were to go for either camera, you can't go wrong. The only minor complaint I have towards these is that they have no physical zoom capabilities, meaning that what you get is what you get. If DJI were to release a version of the Osmo Pocket that could physically zoom in, it would, in my opinion, be a game changer. The other thing I highly recommend using with the Osmo Pocket is a grip. This one right here is a fairly inexpensive option I picked up off Amazon. It has a battery located inside the grip, which allows it to keep my Osmo charged even more. The Osmo Pocket has an admittedly short battery life, so having these extra charging options is a must-have in my opinion. Something as simple as a portable power bank would do more than enough to keep you going for an entire day. Next, let's move on to my aerial footage. The drone I mainly use is the DJI Mavic Air. This drone is a bit out of date, but does get decent looking 4K footage, and I have no major complaints about it. One of the things that I do really like that DJI has done with their drones is make them compact and very easily transportable. By creating designs that fold and unfold, DJI has made drones far easier to bring with you. I don't typically bring a drone with me to theme parks, and I also wouldn't recommend you to either. When I have direct park permission to do so, I do use it, but it is only when I am working with the marketing department directly when I feel comfortable using one near a theme park. Hey, so DJI, I feel like I should be sponsored at this point. Wanna hook me up or anything? This next camera is what we use to get our on-ride footage. Introducing the DJI Action 2. I chose this camera specifically because of its size and capabilities. This is a little smaller than the typical GoPro or DJI Osmo Action, so it is slightly more discreet than other cameras. One of the other really killer features to me is the fact that it can record up to 4K 120 frames per second. Being able to use this and getting slow motion footage on ride is absolutely killer, and I couldn't ask for anything better. The next important thing to talk about is mounting options. So normally I prefer to use a wrist mount since it's really small and compact and is easy to get on and off. I also do have one of the GoPro chest mounts, and then I also have the handlebar and the roll cage mounts. All of these different mounting options have their own specific uses. For instance, I prefer to use the wrist mount just because of how small it is, but some parks won't actually allow you to use that, for instance Knoebels, so that's when the chest mount comes into play. The other option that I use is the handlebar and the roll cage mounts. These I use specifically for my POVs that I got at Oaks Park on Adrenaline Peak and Zoom Coaster. This is a really good option if you're trying to just step up your POV game just a little bit more. However, this one is only able to be used with explicit park permission. So realistically, I would recommend either the wrist mount or the chest mount. Again, about that sponsorship, DJI makes a lot of good stuff. This microphone was what I used for the Enchanted Forest documentary. The connectivity options this mic has are incredible, and it does a really good job at capturing solid audio too. As you probably heard in the documentary itself, the audio quality is great and did a fairly good job at blocking out noise as well. I just wish these mics had replaceable batteries. Now, this is a really important thing for you guys. If you're using a camera with a lens, which is like every single one of them out there, then you're gonna need to make sure to keep that lens clean. There are so many instances on Instagram and elsewhere where I've noticed for people posting photos with clear spots in their photos. Look, I get it, not everyone edits their photos before they post them, so taking proper care of your camera is going to be really important. Having a good set of lens pens and a properly filtered dust blower is a necessity in my opinion. It's really important that the dust blower has a filter on it so you don't end up blowing more dust on the lens or sensor when you're trying to clean it. If you can avoid it, do not swap your lenses out at a theme park. Changing a lens outside is not a good idea and is a guaranteed way to get dust on your sensor, but if you have to do it, bring these tools with you. There really is no excuse not to have these since most decent lens pens are less than $20. You can also get a good set for about $35. Trust me, it's worth it. On to the last major piece of equipment that we use at theme parks. This would be the Peak Design Travel Tripod. I've messed around with a lot of tripods and honestly have felt indifferent to them. They all do a fairly decent job and act like tripods. This tripod is a step above, however. You can easily tell that the minds at Peak Design were people experienced in the field, since they designed extremely useful features into this tripod. The other super nice part about it is the fact that when folded up, it fits neatly into a water bottle pouch. Next is the fact that it has quick release levers at every segment on the legs. This means that it is quick to deploy and also quick to collapse. A final note, the included tool that comes with this tripod is especially great, since every bolt that can be tightened on the tripod is the same size as the heads on the tool. I will warn you, however, that this tripod is quite spendy. It comes in two versions, an aluminum and a carbon fiber model, and they are both heavy on the wallet. The aluminum version comes in at $380 and the carbon fiber model is $600. This is quite a high entry price, so I would really only recommend this piece of equipment if you're sure you're going to stick with this hobby for the long haul. A cheap tripod will serve you well for a while, but won't be nearly as stable as this one. Another key piece of information with this tripod, I highly recommend getting a fluid head for it. This goes for any tripod. If you want to get video footage while using a tripod, a fluid head is absolutely necessary. Fortunately, there are a ton of options on the market at varying price points, so the world is your oyster. Now, how do I carry this stuff around with me at a park? Well, that's where the backpack comes into play. This is a subject I may make a separate video about later, but the backpack that I use to store this equipment is the Lowepro Trekker Lite BP150. Flows right off the tongue. This backpack is great because it has one large open compartment in it that is large enough for my Sony camera to fit in with lens attached, while still being able to fit in the lockers found at theme parks. I have had some weird issues with this backpack somewhat falling apart at the seams if I pack it too tightly, which hasn't been a massive issue, but it is still something to consider. One other important note, this backpack doesn't have any padding in the actual compartment, so I went ahead and took this foam divider from an equipment case and put it in the bottom. As for the actual straps, this backpack is incredibly comfortable and has plenty of padding in the back region, so it does not hurt after a long day of use. Like I said, choosing the correct backpack for theme park trips is a bit of a long subject, so I'm going to make a separate video about it later. The last thing I wanted to do was to show you what it's like when I pack the equipment into the backpack. Now, first things first, when I go to a theme park, usually I don't pack the drone or the DJI mic, as these aren't really necessary. I usually like to start off with the camera with the 200 to 600mm lens attached. Then I move on to the rest of the equipment. Once it's all packed, this is what it all looks like. As you can see, the backpack itself isn't completely huge and stores everything that I need it to. Granted, if I wanted to add anything inside like souvenirs or anything else, it does get really tight, so that is something else to keep in mind. Ultimately, the important note I want to make is that you don't need this kind of equipment to get good photos and videos. I personally pride myself as someone who wants to make a career out of taking photos and videos at theme parks, so I personally wanted to invest in good equipment for it. There are plenty of other content creators who have equipment that is half the size and less than half the cost of everything we have here, but I am someone who likes to get the best quality content that I can. You don't need the biggest or the baddest or the best equipment to get good content. It is more important that you practice and experiment with good skills rather than using the best equipment you can get your hands on. Ultimately, it's the artist, not the paintbrush. Anyways, that's all for now. Happy shooting out there! Thank you so much for watching this video. Don't forget to leave a like and comment below and hit that bell icon. Special thanks to our Patreon supporters, Nathan Martin and Future Collective. $1 a month helps me bring even more content to you guys, and I even have some exclusive content coming, so check it out. Check the description below to find links to the rest of our pages. Thanks for watching the video, and ride on, Coaster Maniacs.